My locker wouldn't open. 3 tries before the combination finally clicked. My fingers clumsy with exhaustion I could feel in my bones. The hospital had been running at capacity all week, which meant everyone worked double shifts whether they wanted to or not. I wanted the paycheck. Needed it, actually. With rent due in 5 days, and my account showing numbers that made my stomach twist, I pulled my jacket from the hook, catching my reflection in the small mirror inside. Hollow eyes stared back at me. When had I started looking this worn down? I closed the locker before I could answer that question. Hair pulled back in a messy bun that had started neat 12 hours ago. The white t-shirt I'd changed into hung loose on a frame that had lost too much weight too quickly. I'd stopped buying groceries 3 weeks ago. Easier to grab whatever the hospital cafeteria was throwing out at shift change. Cheaper to skip meals entirely when the alternative was going home. Home. The word tasted bitter. That studio apartment in Queens wasn't home anymore. It was a cage, and Ryan held the key. I shouldered my bag and headed for the exit, nodding goodbye to Maria at the reception desk. She'd worked nights at Mount Sinai for 20 years, knew every nurse by name, always had a kind word. Tonight she looked at me with concern I pretended not to notice. "You okay, honey? You look pale." "Just tired. Long day." The lie came easily. I'd been practicing it for months. Outside, November wind cut through my thin jacket. I should have grabbed my heavier coat this morning, but Ryan had been passed out on it, reeking of whiskey and rage from whatever had set him off the night before. Better to freeze than wake him. The walk to the subway normally took 15 minutes. Tonight it felt like miles. Each step required conscious effort, my legs heavy and uncooperative. When had I last eaten? Yesterday morning, maybe. Half a protein bar from the vending machine. My stomach had stopped growling days ago, replaced by a hollow ache I'd learned to ignore. Rain started as I descended the subway stairs. Light at first, then heavier, soaking through my jacket before I reached the platform. Perfect. Just perfect. I stood shivering as water dripped from my hair, watching my breath fog in the underground chill. The platform was crowded despite the late hour. Manhattan never really slept, and neither did its subway system. Bodies pressed together, everyone trying to stay warm, stay dry, stay invisible in that particular way New Yorkers perfected. Don't make eye contact. Don't engage. Just get where you're going and mind your business. Dizziness hit me as the train pulled in. I grabbed the pole, steadying myself as passengers surged forward. The motion, the noise, the press of bodies, it all felt overwhelming suddenly. My vision grayed at the edges. Get on the train, Amanda. Just get on the train. Get home. Lock the door. Survive another night. I pushed forward with the crowd, finding a spot near the middle of the car. No seats available. Not that I expected any. I wrapped my hand around the overhead rail, gripping tight as the train lurched into motion. The swaying made everything worse. My empty stomach rolled. Sweat broke out on my forehead despite the cold. I focused on breathing, counting inhales and exhales like they'd taught us in nursing school for managing anxiety. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. Except my body wasn't cooperating. The counting scattered. My grip on the rail loosened. I was going to faint. I recognized the signs professionally even as I experienced them personally. Tunnel vision. Nausea. Weakness spreading through my limbs like water. Not here. Not now. Not in front of all these people. The train took a curve too fast. Or maybe it was normal speed, and I was the one spinning. My hand slipped from the rail. My knees buckled. I fell, but I didn't hit the ground. Strong arms caught me, pulling me against a solid chest. My head lolled against expensive fabric that smelled like cedar and something else. Something warm and masculine and completely unfamiliar. "I've got you." The voice was deep, calm, with the faintest trace of an accent I couldn't place through the fog in my head. I tried to speak, to apologize, to explain that I was fine and didn't need help. But the words wouldn't come. My body had shut down, exhausted beyond function. Through half-closed eyes I saw him. Dark hair, sharp features, eyes so brown they were almost black, focused on me with an intensity that should have been frightening but somehow wasn't. He was tall, I realized. Even sitting, I could tell he was well over 6 feet, broad-shouldered in a black shirt and charcoal blazer that fit perfectly. "Miss, can you hear me?" His hand moved to my face, fingers gentle as they checked my pulse at my throat. "Professional. Careful." I managed a weak nod. That's when his gaze dropped to my arm. My jacket sleeve had ridden up when he caught me, exposing the inside of my forearm, exposing the bruises. His entire body went rigid. Those dark eyes fixed on the marks, 4 distinct ovals in yellow and purple. Finger-shaped, unmistakable. I saw recognition flash across his face. Not confusion or curiosity. Recognition. Like he'd seen this before. Like he knew exactly what those bruises meant. "Who did this?" His voice had changed. Still quiet. But there was steel underneath now. Something dangerous lurking beneath the surface calm. I pulled weakly at my sleeve, trying to cover the evidence. "I'm fine. Just clumsy. I fell at work." "You fell." He didn't believe me. The way he said it made clear he knew I was lying. "When's the last time you ate?" The question caught me off guard. Today. Earlier. Try again." He adjusted his hold on me, keeping me upright as the train continued its journey. "And this time, don't lie." Tears pricked my eyes. I didn't cry anymore. I'd trained myself out of it months ago. Learned that crying only made Ryan angrier. But something about this stranger's directness, the lack of judgment in his tone, cracked something inside me. "Yesterday," I whispered. "Maybe." He muttered something under his breath in another language. Italian, maybe. Then he spoke over my head to someone I couldn't see. "Marco, bring the car to the next stop. We're getting off. Wait." I tried to push away from him, to stand on my own. I don't even know you. My name is Alessandro Rinaldi." He said it like it should mean something to me. When I just stared blankly, something that might have been approval flickered in his eyes. "And right now, what you need is food, water, and somewhere safe to recover. I can provide all 3. I have to go home." Even saying it made my stomach clench with dread. "Do you want to go home?" The question hung between us. Simple, direct, impossible to answer without revealing everything I'd been hiding. The train slowed, pulling into the next station. Alessandro stood smoothly, lifting me like I weighed nothing, one arm under my knees, the other supporting my back. I should have protested, should have demanded he put me down. Instead, I let my head rest against his shoulder, too tired to fight. "This is kidnapping," I mumbled. "This is helping." He stepped off the train onto the platform. There's a difference. A man appeared beside us. Tall, broad, with a face that suggested he'd been in his share of fights. He wore a dark suit and an earpiece, moving with the kind of alertness I associated with security guards or bodyguards. "Car's waiting, sir." His accent was thicker than Alessandro's, definitely Italian. "Good. Let's go." They moved through the station with purpose, Alessandro carrying me while Marco cleared a path ahead. People stepped aside automatically. Whether from Alessandro's commanding presence or Marco's intimidating bulk, I couldn't tell. Probably both. The rain was coming down in sheets when we emerged onto the street. A black SUV idled at the curb, windows tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. Marco opened the rear door, and Alessandro slid in, still holding me. "Wait." I tried one more time to protest as the door closed, sealing us inside. "You can't just... I don't... breathe." Alessandro settled me on the seat beside him, his hand steady on my shoulder. "You're safe. That's all that matters right now." Safe. When was the last time I'd felt safe? The car pulled into traffic. I watched streetlights blur past through the window, my mind struggling to process what was happening. I should be terrified. This was every warning I'd ever received about strangers and danger and trusting the wrong person. But as Alessandro retrieved a bottle of water from somewhere and pressed it into my hands, as he draped his jacket over my shivering shoulders, as his dark eyes watched me with concern rather than threat, I couldn't find the fear I knew I should feel. "Drink slowly," he instructed as I fumbled with the cap. Small sips. The water was cold and perfect. I hadn't realized how thirsty I was until the first swallow. I wanted to gulp it down, but his hand on the bottle kept me from drinking too fast. "Where are we going?" My voice sounded stronger now. The water was already helping. "My home. I have a doctor on call who'll examine you." "I'm a nurse. I don't need a doctor. Nurses make terrible patients." There was almost warmth in his tone. "You know that as well as I do." He wasn't wrong. I'd seen enough nurses ignore their own health while caring for everyone else. The SUV turned onto Park Avenue, pulling up to a building that screamed money. Doorman. Marble lobby visible through glass doors. The kind of place I'd never afford in 10 lifetimes. I looked down at my wet clothes, my dirty sneakers, my bruised arm still partially visible. Then at Alessandro in his expensive clothes and confident demeanor. "I don't belong here. You're here because I brought you here. That means you belong." He opened the door and stepped out, extending his hand to help me. "Come. Let's get you warm and fed." I took his hand. The decision felt monumental and inevitable all at once, like stepping off a cliff or into a new life. Maybe both. As I stood on shaking legs, the world tilted again. Darkness crept in from the edges, my body finally giving up the fight to stay conscious. The last thing I remembered was Alessandro's arms catching me again, his voice low and reassuring as everything went black. "I've got you. You're safe now." Consciousness returned slowly, like surfacing from deep water. My first awareness was softness. The sheets beneath me felt like clouds compared to the threadbare bedding I'd grown used to. Then warmth. Genuine warmth that didn't come from piling on every blanket I owned. Finally, light filtering through my eyelids, gentle and amber rather than the harsh glare of my apartment's single bulb. I opened my eyes to unfamiliar surroundings. High ceilings, cream-colored walls with subtle gold accents, a chandelier that looked like it belonged in a museum. The bed I lay in was easily king-sized, piled with pillows in shades of blue and ivory. Heavy curtains framed windows that showed a skyline view I recognized as Manhattan, but from a height I'd never experienced. Where was I? Memory crashed back. The subway. Fainting. Strong arms catching me. Dark eyes studying the bruises on my arm with recognition that made my stomach twist. Alessandro Rinaldi. I sat up too quickly, and the room spun. My hand went to my head, finding my hair loose and slightly damp. Someone had removed my wet jacket. I was still in my t-shirt and jeans, but my sneakers were gone, placed neatly by the door. A knock sounded before I could panic further. The door opened to reveal Alessandro carrying a silver tray. He'd changed from the blazer into a simple black sweater, sleeves pushed to his elbows. In daylight, or what passed for it through the curtains, I could see him more clearly. Mid-30s, maybe. Sharp cheekbones and a strong jaw. Hair dark enough to be almost black, styled back but with a few strands falling forward. And those eyes, brown so deep they appeared black in certain light, currently watching me with careful attention. "You're awake. Good." He set the tray on the nightstand. "How do you feel?" "Confused." My voice came out hoarse. "What time is it?" "Just past noon. You've been asleep for about 12 hours. He poured tea from a delicate pot into a matching cup. "Dr. Vincent examined you last night after you lost consciousness. With your permission, of course." "I don't remember giving permission. You were semi-conscious but responsive. I asked if you'd allow a doctor to check you over." You nodded. He handed me the cup. "Chamomile with honey. It'll help." I took it, the warmth seeping into my palms. "What did he find?" Alessandro pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat, maintaining a respectful distance. "Severe dehydration, malnutrition. Your blood pressure was dangerously low." He paused, his gaze steady. "Multiple contusions in various stages of healing, indicating prolonged physical trauma." My face burned. Having a stranger, even a doctor, examine my body while I slept felt violating. But underneath the embarrassment was relief that someone finally saw, that the evidence existed beyond my own experience of it. I should go. I set the cup down, moving to stand. "Where?" The question was gentle but firm. "Back to whoever gave you those bruises. It's not your concern. You made it my concern when you fainted into my arms on a subway train." He leaned forward slightly. "I'm not trying to trap you here, Amanda. but I am asking you to stay until you're strong enough to make decisions from a place of health rather than desperation. How do you know my name? Your hospital ID was in your bag. Mount Sinai. Nurse Amanda Turner, 27 years old. He stood, moving to the window. I took the liberty of calling the hospital this morning. Told them you were ill and wouldn't be in for your next shift. Your supervisor, Maria, seemed worried, but understanding. I should have been angry at the presumption. Instead, I felt grateful someone had handled the details I hadn't had energy to consider. Why are you doing this? The question came out quieter than I intended. Alessandro turned back to me, and something in his expression shifted, became almost vulnerable. When I was 12, my mother was killed by her boyfriend. He beat her regularly for years. She hid it from everyone, including me, until the night he went too far. His jaw tightened. I recognize the signs, Amanda. The weight loss, the fear, the bruises in places usually covered. I couldn't save my mother, but I can make sure you have the option she never got. A safe place to recover and decide what comes next. The raw honesty in his words cracked something inside me. This wasn't pity. It was understanding born from lived experience. Just for today, I whispered. I'll stay just for today. That's all I'm asking. He gestured to the tray. Eat. Rest. We'll talk more later if you want. He left, closing the door quietly behind him. I stared at the tray. Toast with butter and jam. Fresh fruit. The tea steaming gently. Simple food, but more than I'd seen in weeks. I ate slowly, my shrunken stomach protesting even small amounts. The bread was fresh, probably from some bakery I'd never be able to afford. The strawberries were sweet and perfect. Each bite felt like luxury. A soft knock came as I finished. An older woman entered, her silver-streaked hair pulled into a neat bun. She wore simple clothes but moved with quiet competence. Miss Amanda, I'm Lucia. I manage Mr. Rinaldi's household. Her accent was Italian but softer than his. I've brought you some clothes. Yours were still damp from the rain. She set a folded stack on the dresser. Soft pants in charcoal gray. A cream sweater that looked incredibly comfortable. Fresh undergarments still in packaging. The bathroom is through that door. There are towels and toiletries. Take your time. She smiled warmly. I'll prepare something more substantial for lunch when you're ready. Thank you. The words felt inadequate. After she left, I made my way to the bathroom. It was larger than my entire apartment bedroom. Marble surfaces. A shower with multiple heads. A bathtub that could fit 3 people. Towels so plush they felt like hugging clouds. I showered, letting hot water wash away days of grime and exhaustion. The soap smelled like lavender. The shampoo left my hair feeling clean for the first time in weeks. I stood under the spray until the water ran cold, then dried off with those impossible towels. The clothes Lucia brought fit perfectly. The sweater was cashmere, soft beyond description. I caught my reflection in the mirror. Still too thin, still showing signs of exhaustion, but cleaner. Less haunted, maybe. I found my way downstairs, following the sound of voices. The penthouse opened into a massive living area with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. Furniture in earth tones. Art on the walls that was probably worth more than I'd make in my lifetime. Everything tasteful and elegant without being ostentatious. Alessandro stood near the windows, phone to his ear, speaking rapid Italian. He saw me and wrapped up the conversation quickly. Better? He asked. Much. Thank you. I gestured to the sweater. For the clothes. For everything. Lucia has soup ready. I hope you like minestrone. We ate in a dining room that was somehow both formal and comfortable. Lucia served soup with fresh bread, then disappeared with the same quiet efficiency she'd shown earlier. Alessandro didn't press for conversation, letting me eat at my own pace. This is incredible, I said after the third spoonful. Rich vegetables and beans in a tomato broth that tasted like someone's grandmother had been cooking it for hours. Lucia's been with my family for 20 years. She refuses to share her recipes. A slight smile touched his lips. Even with me. Smart woman. We fell into conversation naturally. He asked about my work, and I found myself talking about nursing, about why I'd chosen it, about the satisfaction of helping people on their worst days. He listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed he was really hearing me. "You light up when you talk about it," he observed. "That's rare. Most people tolerate their work. You love yours." "I used to want to be a doctor," I admitted, "but my father got sick right after I graduated college. Medical bills piled up. By the time he passed, I had debt and no energy left for medical school. Nursing felt like a compromise I could live with. Do you regret it?" I considered. "No. Doctors save lives, but nurses hold hands. We're there for the fear and pain and small victories. There's value in that." Alessandro nodded thoughtfully. We talked about books next, discovering a shared love for mystery novels, then movies, where we disagreed completely on what made a good film. He liked action and thrillers. I preferred quiet character studies. "You just enjoy watching things explode," I accused. "And you enjoy watching people have long conversations about their feelings. At least my movies have substance. Mine have entertainment value." We were both smiling, and I realized with surprise that I was relaxed. Actually relaxed, not performing the careful management of mood I'd mastered with Ryan. The day passed in that strange, suspended way. Lucia brought tea in the afternoon. Alessandro worked in his study while I read a book from his extensive library. We had dinner together, talking about nothing and everything. By the time evening arrived, exhaustion pulled at me again, despite sleeping so long. My body was still catching up. "You should rest," Alessandro said, noticing me stifle a yawn. "Tomorrow you'll feel stronger." I made my way back to the guest room, changed into the soft pajamas Lucia had somehow procured, and climbed into that cloud of a bed. Sleep came quickly. Too quickly. The dream started the way it always did. Ryan's voice, low and dangerous. "Where have you been?" The smell of whiskey on his breath. His hand closing around my arm, fingers digging into the already tender bruises. "You think you can just leave? You think anyone else wants you? Please, I just worked a double shift." My voice in the dream, small and scared and hating itself for both. Liar. His other hand rose, and I saw it coming but couldn't move, couldn't escape. I screamed. The sound ripped from my throat, tearing me from sleep into darkness. My chest heaved. Sweat soaked the pajamas. The room spun, and for a terrifying moment I couldn't remember where I was. The door burst open. Alessandro appeared, moving fast, but stopping just inside the threshold. He wore sweatpants and nothing else. And even in my panic, I registered the muscular build, the tattoos visible on his ribs and shoulder. "Amanda." He approached slowly, hands visible and non-threatening. "You're safe. You had a nightmare. You're safe here." A sob broke from me. Then another. The dam I'd built over months cracked wide open, and I couldn't stop crying. Great heaving gasps that shook my whole body. All the fear and pain and exhaustion poured out in an unstoppable flood. The bed dipped as Alessandro sat on the edge, maintaining distance but offering presence. "Let it out. You're safe now. I can't go back." The words tumbled between sobs. "I can't go back there. He'll kill me eventually. I know he will. But I don't have anywhere else. No family, no money saved. I'm trapped, and I'm so tired of being afraid." "Then don't go back." His voice was steady, an anchor in the storm. "Stay here. Recover. Figure out your next step from a position of strength. You don't understand. Ryan, he gets worse when he drinks, and he's been drinking more. Last week he threw a glass at my head, missed by inches. I wiped at tears with shaking hands. I thought about calling the police, but he's charming. He'd convince them I was being dramatic. And then I'd go home, and he'd make me pay for embarrassing him." Alessandro's hands curled into fists where they rested on his thighs. "What's his full name?" "Why? Because I'm going to make sure he never touches you again." The quiet certainty in his voice sent a shiver through me. This was the man Marco called Sir, the man people made space for without being asked. Whatever Alessandro Rinaldi did for a living, violence wasn't foreign to him. "Just having somewhere safe to stay is everything," I said. "I don't need you to do anything else. You're not going back there, Amanda. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not until you choose to. If ever." He stood. "Try to sleep. I'll be right across the hall if you need anything." He moved toward the door, and something in me panicked at being alone again with the nightmare residue. Could you... I stopped, embarrassed. Never mind. He turned back. What do you need? Could you just sit? For a few minutes? I know it's stupid, but I don't want to be alone right now. It's not stupid. He returned to the chair near the bed, settling in. Sleep. I'll stay. I lay back down. And the last thing I remembered before exhaustion claimed me was the solid presence of him keeping watch, making me feel safer than I had in longer than I could remember. 3 weeks passed in a rhythm I'd never experienced before. Days blurred together in the best possible way, each one bringing small moments of healing I hadn't known I needed. Alessandro's house in the country became my sanctuary. Not the penthouse where I'd first woken, but a sprawling property 40 minutes north of Manhattan. Trees surrounded us on all sides, creating privacy and peace. The house itself was beautiful, but comfortable, with windows that let in natural light and rooms that felt lived in rather than staged. On day 5, I'd called the hospital. Not to quit, but to arrange part-time hours. Maria, my supervisor, had been understanding in that way only nurses who'd seen everything could be. Take care of yourself first, honey, she'd said. We need you healthy, not burned out. Alessandro insisted on having Marco drive me to and from my shifts. At first, I'd wanted to protest. Tell him I was perfectly capable of taking the train like I had for years. But the words never came, because the truth was, having someone ensure I got safely to work and back lifted a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. For the first time in months, I didn't spend my commute looking over my shoulder or jumping at every unexpected sound. So I accepted it, simply said thank you, and climbed into the car each Tuesday and Thursday morning. Work felt different now. I moved through my shifts with energy I'd forgotten I possessed. Patients noticed, co-workers noticed. Even Dr. Morales, who barely remembered anyone's name, stopped me in the hallway to comment that I looked better. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it, she'd said, already moving on to her next crisis. What I was doing was eating 3 meals a day, sleeping in a bed that felt like sleeping on air, living without fear tightening my chest every time I heard footsteps behind me. The evenings became my favorite time. Alessandro usually worked from home, taking calls and video meetings in his study while I read or explored the property. But once 6 o'clock hit, his work phone went silent, and the time was ours. We cooked together, not fancy elaborate meals, but simple food that required collaboration. He taught me how to make proper risotto, standing behind me to show the exact motion needed to stir the rice. I introduced him to my grandmother's cornbread recipe, the one thing I could make perfectly from memory. This is incredible, he'd said after the first bite, surprise evident on his face. Don't sound so shocked. Nurses can cook, you know. I'm shocked that you've been holding back this skill. We could have been eating cornbread for weeks. We watched old movies on a projection screen in the den. Alessandro favored Italian cinema, black and white films from the 50s and 60s that required me to read subtitles. I made him sit through romantic comedies from the 90s, the kind with predictable plots and happy endings guaranteed. This is painful, he'd muttered during one particularly cheesy moment. Shh. This is the good part. They've known each other for 2 days. How is this love? It's a movie. Suspend your disbelief. But he'd stayed, watching until the inevitable kiss and happily ever after. And when I glanced over, his expression was softer than his words suggested. Mostly, we talked. About everything and nothing. Our conversations stretched late into the night, covering topics that ranged from profound to ridiculous. He told me about growing up in Rome before his family moved to New York when he was 15. About learning to navigate American schools while barely speaking English. About his mother's death and how it had shaped every decision since. I shared pieces of myself I usually kept hidden. My father's long illness and how watching him fade had felt like losing him 1,000 times before he actually died. The relief mixed with guilt when it finally ended. The debt that had buried my dreams of medical school but somehow led me to nursing, which turned out to be exactly where I belonged. Do you think things happen for a reason? I asked one night, curled in the corner of the couch while rain pattered against the windows. Alessandro considered from his seat across from me. I think we make meaning from what happens. The universe is chaos. We're the ones who create patterns. That's very philosophical for midnight. You asked a philosophical question. Fair point. The comfortable silences were almost better than the conversations. Sitting in the same room, each doing our own thing, but aware of the other's presence. Him reviewing documents while I sketched in a notebook I'd found in the guest room. Me reading while he listened to music through headphones, occasionally closing his eyes and losing himself in whatever he was hearing. The tension between us built gradually. A hand lingering when passing dishes, eyes meeting across the room and holding a beat too long. The awareness of him when he was near, like my body had developed a radar specifically tuned to his frequency. I told myself it was gratitude. He'd saved me, given me shelter, asked nothing in return. Of course I felt drawn to him. It was natural to confuse rescue with attraction. Except it wasn't confusion. The pull I felt had nothing to do with what he'd done for me, and everything to do with who he was. The way he listened when I spoke, giving me his full attention like my words mattered. How he moved through the world with confidence that didn't need to announce itself. The rare smiles that transformed his entire face, making him look younger and less burdened. The kindness underneath the dangerous exterior. Because I wasn't naive. I knew what Alessandro was. The way people deferred to him. The business calls conducted in rapid Italian that ended with terse commands. The security that was always present, but never obvious. Marco wasn't just a driver. The house wasn't just a house. Alessandro Rinaldi wasn't just a businessman, but he was also the man who made sure I ate breakfast every morning, who asked about my patients without prying for details I couldn't share, who fell asleep on the couch during rom-coms, but never complained when I wanted to watch another. On the 21st night, a storm rolled in. Thunder that shook the windows and lightning that turned the sky white for split seconds. I was reading in the living room when I heard Alessandro's voice from his study, sharp and tense in a way I'd never heard before. I shouldn't have gone to check. His business wasn't mine, and he'd carefully maintained that boundary. But something in his tone pulled me from the couch and down the hallway. The study door was cracked open. Through the gap, I saw him standing by the window, phone pressed to his ear. Even from behind, his tension was visible, shoulders tight, free hand clenched at his side. He spoke in Italian, too fast for me to follow with my limited understanding. But I caught the anger, the frustration, and underneath it, something that sounded like worry. The call ended abruptly. He stood there for a long moment, staring out at the storm, before turning and seeing me in the doorway. I didn't mean to intrude. I started to back away. I heard voices and wanted to make sure everything was okay. Come in. He gestured to the chairs facing his desk. I entered hesitantly, choosing the leather armchair closest to the door. Alessandro remained by the window, his back to me. Business complications, he said finally. Nothing that concerns you, but nothing easily solved either. I didn't ask questions, didn't press for details he clearly wasn't offering. Instead, I just sat there, present and quiet. Minutes passed. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, just waited. Finally, Alessandro moved from the window and sank into the chair beside mine rather than behind his desk, close enough that our arms nearly touched. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? I haven't done anything. For being here. For not asking questions or trying to fix things. He turned to face me. For just staying. My hand moved before I could think about it, reaching across the small space to rest on his. His fingers were warm, slightly rough at the tips. They closed around mine immediately, holding on like I was anchoring him. Whatever it is, you'll handle it, I said. You're good at that, handling things. What makes you think so? Because you handled me, and I wasn't exactly easy. A small smile touched his lips. You were terrified and malnourished. That's not difficult. That's tragic. Still, you knew what I needed before I did. That takes skill. His thumb traced circles on the back of my hand. The touch sent warmth up my arm and into my chest. Amanda. He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Whatever he was about to say hung between us, as tangible as the storm outside. I leaned closer. Just an inch, maybe less. Testing. Offering. Alessandro's free hand came up to cup my face, his palm warm against my cheek. His eyes searched mine, Asking a question, I answered by closing the remaining distance. The kiss was soft, careful. His lips moved against mine, with a gentleness that made my chest ache. Nothing rushed or demanding. Just connection, pure and simple. When we broke apart, his forehead rested against mine. I shouldn't want this. You're healing. You need time, not complications. Maybe you're exactly what I need. My hand slid to his chest, feeling his heartbeat racing under my palm. Maybe we're what we both need. Amanda, I'm not a good man. The things I do, the life I lead, I don't care about that right now. I care about this, about you and me in this moment. He kissed me again, deeper this time, but still controlled. Like he was restraining himself, afraid of pushing too far too fast. I understood. After Ryan's bruising grabs and forceful demands, Alessandro's careful attention felt revolutionary. We moved upstairs together, his hand never leaving mine. My heart pounded as we entered his room, larger than the guest room but just as tastefully decorated. The bed dominated the space, and I felt a flutter of nervousness mixed with anticipation. Alessandro stopped at the foot of the bed, turning to face me. We can stop any time. Just say the word, and we stop. I know. I need you to know you're safe. Always safe with me. The earnestness in his voice, the obvious concern for my comfort, made me fall a little bit more. I know. I repeated. I trust you. What followed was tender in ways I hadn't known intimacy could be. Alessandro paid attention to every reaction, every breath, every subtle signal. When I tensed, he slowed. When I relaxed, he continued. His hands were gentle but confident, learning what I liked through trial and patient observation. Afterward, lying in his arms with my head on his chest, I felt complete silence in my mind for the first time in years. No anxious thoughts about saying the wrong thing. No calculations about how to keep the peace. Just quiet contentment. You're thinking, Alessandro murmured, his fingers tracing patterns on my shoulder. Just that I'm happy. Is that allowed? More than allowed. Required, actually. I have very strict policies about happiness in this house. I smiled against his skin. Strict policies. That sounds very you. I'm a man who appreciates order. Control freak, you mean. Organized. There's a difference. We lay there as the storm gradually passed, replaced by the gentler sound of steady rain. Eventually, sleep pulled at me, and I drifted off, feeling safer than I ever had. Morning came softly. Sunlight filtered through curtains I didn't remember closing. Alessandro's side of the bed was empty, but I could hear sounds from somewhere downstairs. I found one of his t-shirts draped over a chair and pulled it on before padding downstairs barefoot. The kitchen smelled like coffee and something sweet. Alessandro stood at the stove, spatula in hand, wearing sweatpants and nothing else. Classical music played from a speaker on the counter. You cook breakfast too? I leaned against the doorframe watching him. He glanced back, and the look in his eyes when he saw me in his shirt made warmth pool in my stomach. I cook many things. You've only seen a fraction of my skills. Humble, too. Always. He plated what turned out to be French toast, adding fresh berries and a dusting of powdered sugar. Sit. Eat. We ate at the small table in the breakfast nook, knees touching under the surface. The food was perfect, and I told him so between bites. My mother taught me, he said. She believed everyone should know how to cook, regardless of gender. Said it was a survival skill. Smart woman. She was. His expression turned thoughtful. She would have liked you. You have the same stubborn independence she had. After breakfast, we moved to the couch with fresh coffee. The morning stretched ahead with no obligations, no schedule to keep. Alessandro pulled me against his side, and I settled in comfortably. We should talk about this, he said after a while. About what last night means. Does it have to mean something specific? It means I care about you. More than I should, probably. He set down his coffee and turned to face me fully. Amanda, I'm falling for you. Have been since you fainted in my arms, looking terrified and defiant at the same time. My heart stuttered. Alessandro, you don't have to say anything. I just need you to know where I stand, what I feel. He took my hand. But you should also know what being with me really means. My business isn't always legal. I have enemies. People who would use you to get to me if they knew you mattered. I assumed as much. Assuming and accepting are different things. I thought about it. About the reality of being with someone whose life existed in shades of gray. About the danger and complication and moral ambiguity. Then I thought about how he made me feel. Safe. Seen. Valued. How he'd given me space to heal without demanding anything in return. How he listened and laughed and showed me kindness I'd forgotten existed. I see you, I said finally. Not just what you do, but who you are. The man who takes care of people, who feels deeply even when you try to hide it, who makes French toast because your mother taught you. I squeezed his hand. That's the person I'm falling for. Everything else is just context. Alessandro pulled me into a kiss that tasted like coffee and promises. When we broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine. We'll figure it out, he said. Together. Together, I agreed. And in that moment, sitting in the morning sunlight with this complicated, dangerous, tender man, I believed it completely. Whatever came next, we would face it side by side. The call came during breakfast on a Tuesday morning. Alessandro's phone buzzed against the kitchen table, and I watched his expression shift from relaxed to guarded in seconds. He answered in Italian, his voice clipped and professional as he stepped away toward the windows. I focused on my coffee, giving him privacy while trying not to obviously eavesdrop. Not that I could understand much. My Italian extended to menu items and basic pleasantries, nowhere near conversational. When he returned, his jaw was tight. He sat across from me, both hands wrapped around his own coffee cup like he needed something to anchor him. That was Marco, he said carefully. He's been keeping an eye on your situation, making sure there are no complications. My stomach dropped. Ryan. He's been asking questions at the hospital. Showed up twice last week looking for you. Maria told him you were on extended medical leave and she had no other information. Alessandro's dark eyes held mine. He's becoming more persistent, more aggressive in his inquiries. I set down my cup before my shaking hands could spill it. 3 weeks of peace, and I'd let myself believe maybe Ryan had given up, moved on to some other target. Deep down, I'd known better. What did he say to Maria? That you'd stolen from him, that he needed to find you to press charges. Alessandro's voice was calm, but I heard the anger underneath. Maria didn't believe him, told him to contact the police if he had a legitimate complaint. He left, but Marco's sources say he's been watching the hospital entrance during shift changes. He's looking for me. It wasn't a question. Yes. I stood abruptly, pacing to the window. The garden stretched out peaceful and green, a stark contrast to the anxiety clawing up my throat. I knew he wouldn't just let me go. Men like Ryan, they see people as possessions. You don't get to leave until they decide you're no longer useful. Alessandro came to stand beside me, close but not touching. I have a proposal. Something concrete that might help. I'm listening. Let me connect you with lawyers. Good ones who specialize in protective orders and domestic violence cases. They can file for a restraining order on your behalf. Legal documentation that Ryan is to stay away from you, the hospital, anywhere you might be. Restraining orders are just paper. The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. They don't actually stop anyone determined enough. No, they don't. His honesty was almost refreshing. But they create legal consequences if he violates them. And they establish a record. If anything happens, there's documentation of the threat he poses. I turned to face him. You've been thinking about this. Planning. I've been preparing for the possibility, yes. He met my gaze steadily. The moment you told me about him, I knew this might become necessary. I wanted to have options ready when you needed them. In the past, someone planning around me without my input would have felt controlling, suffocating. But Alessandro wasn't deciding for me. He was providing tools and letting me choose whether to use them. Okay, I said. Call the lawyers. Let's file for the restraining order. Something like relief flickered across his face. You're sure? I'm tired of running. Tired of being afraid. If there's a legal option, I want to take it. I straightened my shoulders. What do I need to do? Within hours, Alessandro had arranged everything. The lawyers, a woman named Rebecca Hale, and her associate David Foster, drove out to meet us that afternoon. They were professional, efficient, and most importantly, kind. Rebecca sat across from me at Alessandro's dining table, her tablet open and ready. I need you to tell me everything. Every incident of abuse, every threat, every time he made you feel unsafe. It's going to be uncomfortable, but the more detail we have, the stronger the case. So I told her. About the first time Ryan hit me, 8 months into our relationship when I'd forgotten to pick up his dry cleaning. How he'd apologized profusely afterward, brought flowers, sworn it would never happen again. About the escalation, the patterns, the way he always found reasons to blame me for his violence, the glass he'd thrown, the nights he'd kept me awake interrogating me about imagined infidelities, the control over money, over my schedule, over everything. Rebecca took notes, her expression neutral but her eyes compassionate. Alessandro sat beside me, silent support I hadn't asked for but desperately needed. This is a strong case, Rebecca said when I finished. Multiple incidents, documented injuries from the hospital, witnesses who can attest to your fear. We'll file the petition tomorrow morning. There'll be a hearing within 2 weeks, probably sooner given the immediacy of the threat. Will I have to see him? My voice came out smaller than I intended. Yes, you'll both need to be present for the hearing. But you'll be in a courtroom with security and a judge. He won't be able to approach you. I'll be there, Alessandro said, in the gallery. You won't be alone. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow would set everything in motion. No more hiding. No more pretending the situation would resolve itself. I was taking action, reclaiming agency I'd lost piece by piece over 2 years. The hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning, 9 days later. 9 days of existing in limbo, knowing Ryan would be served with papers, knowing his rage would escalate at being challenged. Alessandro didn't leave my side during those days. He worked from home, kept his phone nearby, made sure Marco or one of the other security was always present. I should have felt smothered. Instead, I felt protected. The morning of the hearing, I dressed with care. Gray pantsuit, minimal makeup, hair pulled back neat and professional. I wanted to look competent, credible, not like a victim, even though that's exactly what I was. You ready? Alessandro asked as Marco pulled the car around. No, but I'm going anyway. The courthouse was downtown Manhattan, all marble and echoing hallways. Rebecca met us in the lobby, David beside her with a leather briefcase that probably cost more than my monthly rent used to. Ryan and his lawyer are already here, Rebecca said quietly. Courtroom C, 3rd floor. We go in, you sit at our table, you answer the judge's questions honestly. That's it. My hands were shaking as we rode the elevator up. Alessandro touched my elbow gently. Breathe. You've got this. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Ryan sat at the defense table with a middle-aged man in a cheap suit. When I walked in, Ryan's head snapped up. Our eyes met. He looked the same. Dark blonde hair, ordinary features, the kind of face that blended into crowds. Nothing about him screamed danger. That was part of what made him so effective. Nobody ever suspected. His eyes narrowed when he saw me. Then his gaze shifted past me to Alessandro, who'd taken a seat in the first row of the gallery. Even from across the room, I saw Ryan's expression change, recognition of a different kind of threat. The judge, a black woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair, called the proceedings to order. Rebecca presented our case methodically. Medical records showing injuries consistent with assault. My testimony about specific incidents. Photos of bruises I'd documented on my phone before deleting them out of fear Ryan would find them. Ryan's lawyer objected repeatedly, called me dramatic, suggested I'd injured myself for attention. Standard defense tactics that made my blood boil, but which the judge seemed to see right through. Mr. Cooper, the judge said finally, addressing Ryan directly. Do you deny striking Miss Turner on multiple occasions? Ryan's expression was earnest, apologetic. The mask I knew so well. Your Honor, Amanda and I had a volatile relationship. There were arguments, yes, but I never intended to hurt her. She's exaggerating normal couple disagreements. Normal couples don't send their partners to the emergency room with cracked ribs. That was an accident. She fell during an argument. An argument where you threw a glass bottle at her head? Ryan's jaw tightened. She's lying. The judge reviewed the paperwork before her. I've seen enough. Miss Turner's request for a restraining order is granted. Mr. Cooper, you are to stay at least 500 feet away from Miss Turner at all times. You may not contact her directly or through intermediaries. You may not visit her place of employment. Violation of this order will result in immediate arrest. Do you understand? Ryan's face flushed red. This is ridiculous. She's manipulating. Do you understand, Mr. Cooper? Yes. The word came out through clenched teeth. We filed out of the courtroom, Rebecca explaining next steps and what the order meant practically. I barely heard her. Relief made my legs weak. Outside the courtroom, Ryan was waiting. His lawyer was nowhere in sight. He stepped into our path. Amanda, his voice was low, meant only for me. This isn't over. You think some piece of paper protects you? You think running to your rich boyfriend keeps you safe? Marco appeared from nowhere, positioning himself between us. Rebecca immediately pulled out her phone. Mr. Cooper, you are currently violating the restraining order issued less than 5 minutes ago. I suggest you leave immediately, or I will call courthouse security. Amanda, Ryan tried again, his eyes finding mine over Marco's shoulder. You know you belong to me. You know? Alessandro's voice cut through, quiet, but absolute. Walk away. Ryan's gaze shifted to Alessandro, who'd moved to stand beside me. The two men sized each other up. Ryan, average height and build, aging poorly from alcohol and anger. Alessandro, tall and composed, radiating controlled danger that didn't need to announce itself. Who the hell are you? Ryan demanded. Someone who keeps his promises. Alessandro's hand found the small of my back, protective without being possessive. And I promised Amanda you wouldn't hurt her again. I don't break promises. There was no explicit threat, no mention of violence or consequences. Just certainty delivered in a tone that made Ryan's bravado crack visibly. This is harassment. Ryan blustered, but he was already backing away. I'll file a complaint. Please do. I'm sure the courthouse would be interested in hearing how you approached Miss Turner immediately after being ordered to stay away. Rebecca's phone was up, clearly recording. Now leave or I'm calling security. Ryan left. Not because he wanted to, but because even he recognized when he was outmatched. I didn't realize I was shaking until Alessandro's arm came around my shoulders. It's done. You're safe. The drive back to the country house was quiet. I stared out the window watching the city give way to suburbs, then trees. By the time we pulled up, exhaustion had replaced adrenaline. I need to walk, I said as we entered the house. Clear my head. I'll come with you. We walked through the garden in silence, following the stone path that wound between flower beds Lucia tended with obvious care. The late afternoon sun filtered through tree leaves, creating patterns of light and shadow on the ground. Thank you, I said finally, for being there today, for everything. You don't need to thank me. Yes, I do. You didn't have to help me. You chose to. That matters. Alessandro stopped walking, turning to face me. Amanda, you matter. What happens to you matters to me. I know we haven't known each other long, but these past weeks, he trailed off, seeming to search for words. You've brought something into my life I didn't know was missing. Peace. Actual peace, not just absence of chaos. My throat tightened. You gave me safety, space to remember who I am without fear. You're remarkable. His hand came up to cup my cheek, thumb brushing along my cheekbone. The way you held yourself together in that courtroom. How you looked Ryan in the eye and didn't back down. You're stronger than you know. I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm barely holding it together. Strength isn't fearlessness. It's feeling the fear and doing what needs doing anyway. He leaned down, pressing his forehead to mine. You did that today. You stood up for yourself, took your life back. I kissed him, pouring everything I couldn't articulate into the connection. Gratitude and attraction, and the beginning of something deeper. When we broke apart, his eyes were warm in the fading light. Come on, he said, taking my hand. Let's go inside. You've had a long day. That evening I cooked dinner, while Alessandro worked through emails in his study. Nothing fancy, just pasta with vegetables and the good olive oil Lucia kept stocked. Simple, comforting food that required attention without demanding too much energy. We ate at the small table in the breakfast nook, knees touching underneath. Alessandro told me about a property deal he was negotiating, something involving a warehouse in Red Hook. I told him about a patient from my last shift, a little boy who'd needed stitches but had been so brave. Normal conversation, normal life. It felt precious and fragile and worth fighting to keep. After dinner, we walked in the garden again, this time with the stars visible overhead. The air had cooled, and I pulled Alessandro's jacket tighter around my shoulders. I keep waiting for something to go wrong, I admitted. For this all to fall apart. Why would it fall apart? Because good things don't last. Not for me. He stopped walking, pulling me around to face him. Then maybe it's time to rewrite that story. Maybe you're allowed to have good things, to be happy, and safe and cared for. You make it sound simple. It is simple. You just have to let yourself believe it. His arms came around me, and I leaned into his warmth. I'm not going anywhere, Amanda. And neither is your safety. You're here, you're protected, and you get to decide what comes next. Standing there in the garden with Alessandro's heartbeat steady against my ear, I let myself believe it, just for that moment. Just enough to imagine a future where fear wasn't the constant background noise of my existence. Stay with me, I whispered. Tonight. Just hold me while I sleep. Always. The country house became my world over the next 3 weeks. Not in a limiting way, but in the way a shelter becomes home when you've been out in the cold too long. Every morning I woke to birdsong instead of sirens. Every night I fell asleep feeling safe. Alessandro had been right about returning to work. I needed the structure, the purpose, the reminder that I was still myself beyond the trauma. So I went back to Mount Sinai 3 days a week, reduced hours that let me focus without exhausting myself. Marco drove me every shift. At first, I'd felt guilty about it. The waste of his time sitting in traffic twice a day just to transport one person. But Alessandro had been firm when I'd tried to protest. This isn't negotiable, he'd said, not unkindly. Ryan knows where you work. Until we're certain he's complying with the restraining order, you don't travel alone. So I stopped arguing. Climbed into the black SUV each Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday morning. Marco never made conversation unless I initiated it, seemingly content with silence and whatever he listened to through his earpiece. The drive became meditative, time to prepare mentally for the shift ahead. Work itself felt different now. I moved through my rounds with energy I'd forgotten I possessed. Patients responded to it. Mrs. Kowalski in 412 actually smiled when I brought her medications. Little Jamie in pediatrics asked if I could be his nurse every day because I didn't seem sad anymore. Out of the mouths of 7-year-olds with broken arms. Maria cornered me during a rare quiet moment at the nurse's station. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. You look like yourself again. I feel like myself again. Good. She squeezed my shoulder. We need you healthy and whole. This job takes enough without you giving pieces you can't afford to lose. The evenings became sacred. Alessandro typically finished work by 6, emerging from his study with that particular looseness in his shoulders that meant he was done thinking about business for the day. We'd gravitated toward cooking together without planning it, just a natural rhythm where one of us would start something and the other would join in. You're doing it wrong, I said one night, watching him massacre an onion. There's no wrong way to chop an onion. There absolutely is. You're creating chaos. I took the knife from his hand, demonstrating the proper technique. Consistent pieces, even cooking. You're very bossy in the kitchen. You're very incompetent with vegetables. But he was grinning, and so was I. And when he wrapped his arms around me from behind to watch my hands work, the domesticity of it made my chest ache in the best way. We cooked pasta with seasonal vegetables, roasted chicken with herbs from Lucia's garden. Simple food that tasted better because we made it together. Meals eaten at the small table in the breakfast nook, knees touching underneath, conversation flowing easily. After dinner, we'd migrate to the den. Alessandro had a weakness for Italian cinema from the 50s and 60s, black and white films with subtitles and complicated plots. I introduced him to my comfort movies, romantic comedies he pretended to hate, but watched without complaint. This is unrealistic. he commented during one particularly cheesy scene. Nobody falls in love in 3 days. It's a movie. The whole point is escapism. Escapism from what? Logic? From reality. Sometimes we need stories where everything works out perfectly. He was quiet for a moment, his arm draped along the back of the couch behind me. Is that what you need? Perfect endings? I need hope that things can work out. That's what these movies give me. I glanced at him. Why? What do your movies give you? Perspective. Reminder that humans are complicated. That love and loss and redemption are universal experiences regardless of language or era. That's surprisingly profound for someone who pretends not to have feelings. I have feelings. I'm just selective about showing them. Lucky me, then. His hand found mine, fingers interweaving. Very lucky. Most nights we talked until late. Conversations that started about nothing and wandered into everything. Alessandro told me about his early years in New York, the culture shock of American schools, learning English by watching television and reading newspapers obsessively. I shared memories of nursing school, the terror of first clinical rotations, the moment I'd realized I was exactly where I belonged. We avoided certain topics by unspoken agreement. He didn't ask about Ryan beyond checking that I felt safe. I didn't ask about the details of his business beyond what he volunteered. We existed in this bubble where the outside world's complications couldn't quite reach us. Until one night when they did. It had been raining all evening, the kind of steady downpour that turns everything gray and cold. I was curled in my favorite corner of the couch, reading a mystery novel Alessandro had recommended. Good thriller, less predictable than most. I heard his voice from the study, sharp, tense in a way that immediately put me on alert. He was speaking Italian, rapid and clipped, with an edge I'd never heard before. I set down my book and moved down the hallway. The study door was cracked open. Through the gap, I could see Alessandro at his desk, phone pressed to his ear, free hand running through his hair in obvious frustration. He saw me in the doorway, and his expression shifted, still tense, but softening slightly. He held up one finger, asking for a minute, and continued the conversation in a quieter tone. When he finally ended the call, he sat there for a long moment, staring at nothing. I knocked softly on the doorframe. Everything okay? Business complications. He stood, moving to the window that overlooked the rain-soaked garden. Nothing that concerns you. I could have left. Should have. Probably. Given him space to deal with whatever was troubling him. Instead, I walked into the study and settled into the chair beside his desk. I'm not asking for details, I said. But I'm here if you need someone to just be present. Alessandro turned from the window. In the low lamplight, the tension in his jaw was visible. The tightness around his eyes. You don't have to do this. Do what? Care about my problems. Your presence here doesn't obligate you to shoulder my burdens. I'm not shouldering anything. I'm just sitting here. I met his eyes steadily. Sometimes that's all someone needs. To not be alone with their thoughts. He studied me for a long moment. Something unreadable crossing his face. Then he moved to the chair beside mine, close enough that I could feel his warmth. There's a situation, he said carefully, with people I do business with. A disagreement about territory and responsibilities. Nothing immediately dangerous, but complicated. Requires delicate handling. Are you safe? Always. I'm very good at navigating these waters. He reached for my hand, his fingers rough and warm. But thank you for asking. We sat there in the quiet study, rain pattering against windows, his thumb tracing circles on my wrist. The touch was soothing, grounding. I realized with sudden clarity that this was what intimacy really looked like. Not just physical connection, but this. Presence without demands. Support without expectations. Amanda? He said quietly. Why are you really here? Because you looked like you needed someone. No, I mean here. In this house. With me. His dark eyes held mine. You could leave. The restraining order is in place. You have options now, yet you stay. My heart was suddenly loud in my ears. You know why. I want to hear you say it. Because I care about you. The words came easier than I expected. Because being here feels right in a way nothing has in years. Because when I think about leaving, about going back to my old life, It feels like suffocating. Alessandro's hand came up to cup my face, his palm warm against my cheek. I'm falling in love with you. Have been since you fainted into my arms, looking both terrified and defiant. I know it's fast. I know it's complicated, but it's true. It's not that fast. I leaned into his touch. We've spent nearly every day together for a month. That's more quality time than most people get in 6 months of casual dating. Is that your nursing logic talking? That's my heart talking. He kissed me then. Not the careful, tentative kisses we'd shared before, but something deeper, more certain. His mouth moved against mine with purpose, and I responded with equal intensity. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. Come upstairs with me, he said softly. Let me show you what you mean to me. We climbed the stairs hand in hand. My heart raced, but not from fear, from anticipation, from want that had been building for weeks. His bedroom was dimly lit from a single lamp. Alessandro turned to face me, his hands gentle on my shoulders. We go at your pace. We stop whenever you want. You're in control here. The consideration in his voice, the obvious care he was taking, made my throat tight with emotion. I trust you. What followed was tender in ways I hadn't known existed. Alessandro paid attention to everything. Every touch, every kiss placed with intention. When I tensed, he slowed. When I sighed, he continued. His hands learned my body with patience and focus, finding what made me gasp, what made me arch into his touch. There was no rush, no demand, just steady attention and building pleasure that eventually crested in waves that left me shaking and breathless. Afterward, we lay tangled together, my head on his chest, his fingers tracing idle patterns on my shoulder. The rain had softened to a gentle patter. Everything felt suspended and perfect. I trailed off, unable to find adequate words. Yes, it was. I could hear the smile in his voice. I mean it. I've never experienced anything like that. His arms tightened around me. Then we're just getting started. I woke to sunlight and the smell of coffee. Alessandro's side of the bed was empty, but I could hear sounds from downstairs. I pulled on his t-shirt from the night before and patted down to find him in the kitchen. He'd made French toast, fresh strawberries, coffee in the expensive machine that produced perfect espresso. He was barefoot in sweatpants, and the domesticity of it made me smile. "Good morning," I said from the doorway. He looked up, and the expression on his face when he saw me in his shirt was pure warmth. "Morning. Hungry?" We ate breakfast with our knees touching under the table. Easy conversation about nothing important. The normalcy of it felt precious. "We should talk," Alessandro said as we finished, "about what this means, where we go from here." "Okay, talk. I care about you deeply. More than I have for anyone in a very long time." He set down his coffee cup. "But you need to understand what being with me really means. My business, my life, it's not simple. There are risks, complications, people who would use you to get to me if they knew you mattered. I figured that out already. Figuring out and accepting are different things." His expression was serious. "I'm asking if you can accept the reality of who I am, what I do, the moral gray areas I operate in." I thought about it, really thought, about the man who'd caught me when I fainted, who'd given me shelter without demands, who'd helped me get a restraining order and made sure I was safe, who listened when I talked about work and made me laugh and touched me like I was something precious. "I see who you are," I said finally. "A man who protects people he cares about, who shows up when it matters, who's capable of tenderness and violence in equal measure." I reached across the table for his hand. "I'm not naive. I know you do things that aren't legal, that you operate outside the boundaries most people stay within. But I also know you're fundamentally decent, that you have lines you won't cross. That matters more to me than perfect morality. You're sure?" "I'm sure I want to be here, with you, building whatever this is between us." I squeezed his fingers. "Everything else we'll figure out as we go." Alessandro stood and pulled me up with him, wrapping his arms around me. "Then we do this together. No secrets about the important things. No pretending my world isn't complicated. But honest and together. Together," I agreed. standing there in the morning sunlight, held by someone who saw all of me and wanted me anyway. I felt something shift into place. This wasn't the life I'd planned. It was better, more real, more mine. Whatever came next, we'd face it side by side. 2 months. That's how long I'd been living with Alessandro when everything changed again. I was finishing my shift at Mount Sinai, updating patient charts at the nurses' station, when Maria appeared beside me with an expression I'd learned to recognize. Concern mixed with protective anger. "Your ex is here," she said quietly. "Downstairs in the lobby. Security called up to warn us." My hands froze on the keyboard. "Ryan? He's demanding to see you. Says it's urgent." Maria's jaw was tight. "I already called the number Alessandro gave me. His people are on their way." At the restraining order. Ryan was violating it, standing in my workplace, the one place he was explicitly forbidden from approaching. "Don't go down there," Maria continued. "Stay here until security arrives." But I was already standing, already moving toward the elevator bank. Not to confront Ryan, but to make sure he didn't come upstairs. The pediatric ward was on this floor. I wouldn't let him near vulnerable children. "Amanda, wait." Maria grabbed my arm. The elevator dinged. Marco stepped out, moving with that particular focused energy that meant business. Behind him, 2 other men in dark suits I recognized from Alessandro's security team. "Miss Turner." Marco's tone was respectful, but firm. "Please stay on this floor. We'll handle the situation." They disappeared into the elevator. I waited with Maria, my heart hammering against my ribs. Other nurses had noticed something was happening, whispering among themselves. I hated being the center of attention, hated that my personal crisis was disrupting the hospital. 10 minutes later, Marco returned. He's been removed from the premises. Police were called. He'll be arrested for violating the restraining order. Relief made my knees weak. "Thank you. Mr. Rinaldi is on his way. He asked that you wait for him." Alessandro arrived 30 minutes later, still in a business suit from whatever meeting he'd left to come here. He pulled me into a brief embrace right there in the hallway, not caring who saw. "Are you okay?" His hands framed my face, eyes searching mine. "I'm fine. Marco got here before Ryan made it upstairs." "Good." His expression was controlled, but I saw the anger simmering underneath. "Let's go home. We need to talk." The drive back to the country house was quiet. Alessandro held my hand, thumb tracing circles on my wrist in that soothing gesture I'd come to love. But his mind was clearly elsewhere, working through something. Once inside, he guided me to the living room. We sat on the couch, and he turned to face me fully. "Ryan violated the restraining order. He'll be arrested, likely tonight." Alessandro's voice was measured. "But a restraining order violation is a misdemeanor. He'll post bail. Be back on the streets within days." I know. I'd researched this. Knew the limitations of the protection I had. "That's not acceptable to me." His dark eyes held mine. "I want your permission to handle this more permanently." "What do you mean?" "I've had investigators looking into Ryan's life since the day I found out about him. They've uncovered things. Financial crimes, corporate fraud, tax evasion." Alessandro leaned forward. "Real crimes with serious federal penalties. I can make sure the right evidence reaches the right people. Ryan goes to prison, not for hitting you, but for stealing from his employer and the government." I should have been shocked. Should have protested the moral ambiguity of manufacturing someone's downfall. Instead, I felt only cold satisfaction. How long would he go away for? 5 years minimum if convicted. Possibly more. "Do it." Alessandro nodded once. "The evidence will reach federal authorities anonymously tonight. From there, it's a matter of waiting for the investigation to conclude." The next 6 weeks were strange. Ryan was arrested for the restraining order violation, spent 2 days in jail, posted bail exactly as Alessandro predicted. But before he could retaliate, federal agents showed up at his apartment with a warrant. Corporate fraud, tax evasion, wire fraud. The charges kept mounting. I watched it unfold through news reports and updates from Rebecca, my lawyer. The evidence against Ryan was overwhelming. Bank records showing fraudulent transactions, tax documents with obvious discrepancies, email trails documenting his schemes, all delivered anonymously to the FBI, all completely legitimate evidence that Ryan had apparently been too arrogant to hide properly. He got sloppy, Alessandro explained one evening. Thought he was smarter than he was. All the investigators did was organize what was already there. During those weeks, life continued with surprising normalcy. I worked my shifts with Marco driving me daily. Alessandro and I fell deeper into our relationship, the crisis with Ryan somehow bringing us closer rather than creating stress. We cooked together, watched movies, made love with increasing familiarity and trust. The trial was scheduled 3 months after Ryan's federal arrest. The legal system moved with its typical glacial pace, but finally the day arrived. I wasn't a major witness this time. Just a brief testimony about the restraining order violation, establishing pattern of behavior. The real evidence was financial. Forensic accountants, FBI agents, documents that told the story of systematic theft and fraud, spanning 3 years. Alessandro sat in the gallery, exactly where he'd been during the restraining order hearing. His presence was a quiet anchor. I could feel him watching, supporting without hovering. Ryan looked diminished in his cheap suit, sitting between his overworked public defender and a table full of damning evidence. When our eyes met across the courtroom, I saw the moment he realized. Saw him understand that this wasn't coincidence, that someone had orchestrated his downfall. His gaze shifted past me to Alessandro. Recognition, understanding. And underneath it all, fear. The verdict came back guilty on all counts. The sentencing happened 2 weeks later. 5 years in federal prison. No possibility of early parole for at least 3 years. I sat in that courtroom and watched Ryan get led away in handcuffs. Felt the weight I'd been carrying for months finally lift from my shoulders. This was real freedom. Not just a restraining order that could be violated, but actual physical separation. Years of knowing exactly where he was, and that he couldn't reach me. Lucia had prepared my favorite meal when we got home. Pasta with vegetables and that incredible sauce she made from scratch. Alessandro opened wine, good wine from his personal collection, and we ate by candlelight in the dining room. "How do you feel?" he asked as we finished. "Free." The word came out with more emotion than I expected. Actually, genuinely free for the first time in years. "Good." He reached across the table for my hand. "Which brings me to something I need to ask you." My heart stuttered. "Okay, you're safe now. Ryan is gone. The immediate threat is resolved." His thumb traced my knuckles. "You don't have to stay here anymore. You could get your own place. Resume your independent life. I would help you with that if it's what you want." "Is that what you want?" I asked carefully. "For me to leave?" "God, no." The words came out fierce. "I want you to stay. Want to wake up with you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. Want to build a life with you." He squeezed my hand. "But I need to know you're choosing to stay because you want to, not because you feel obligated or scared to leave." I stood, moving around the table to straddle his lap, my hands framing his face. "Alessandro, I'm not staying out of obligation. I'm staying because this is where I want to be. Because you're who I want to be with." "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." I kissed him softly. "I love you. I'm in love with you. And I want to build a life together." His arms came around me, holding tight. "I love you too. Have since the beginning." We sat there for a long time, wrapped around each other, letting the reality of our future settle in. Later, lying in bed with my head on his chest, we talked about practical things. I wanted to continue nursing, maybe pursue a specialization in pediatrics. Alessandro immediately offered to pay for the coursework, but I pushed back gently. "I appreciate it, but I want to do this myself, on my own terms." "I respect that." His fingers traced patterns on my shoulder. "But at least let me help with logistics. Flexible schedule so you can attend classes. Transportation if you need it. The support structure that lets you focus on studying rather than survival. That I can accept." "Good." He kissed the top of my head. "Because I'm invested in your success. Your dreams matter to me. 3 years of nursing experience. Another year of specialized training would make me eligible for pediatric certification. The idea of working exclusively with children, of helping families through their scariest moments, felt right in a way general nursing never quite had. What about you? I asked. What are your dreams beyond the business? Alessandro was quiet for a moment. Honestly, this, what we have right now. Coming home to someone who sees me. Building something real that isn't about power or territory. He shifted to look at me. I've spent my whole adult life focused on the organization, making it stronger, more profitable, more feared, but none of that meant anything at the end of the day. I went home to empty houses and had everything except what mattered. And now I have you. Have a reason to want more than just survival and dominance. His smile was soft. You make me want to be better. Not different, but better. I understood the distinction. He would always be who he was, do what he did. The darkness in him wasn't something that could be erased or ignored. But he could choose how that darkness manifested, could use his power for protection, rather than just intimidation. We're going to be okay, I said with certainty. Whatever comes next, we'll handle it together. Together, he agreed. And lying there in the safety of his arms, knowing Ryan was behind bars, and my future was my own to shape, I believed it completely. This was just the beginning. 8 months had passed since that rainy night on the subway, when Alessandro caught me mid-fall. 8 months that felt simultaneously like a lifetime, and no time at all. My life had transformed so completely that sometimes I barely recognized the exhausted, frightened woman I'd been. The rhythm we'd found worked perfectly. I spent 3 days a week at Mount Sinai, working shifts that challenged me professionally without draining me completely. The other days I used for studying, having enrolled in a pediatric nursing certification program that would be complete in another 4 months. Alessandro had been right about needing support structure rather than just money. Marco drove me to classes and clinical rotations. Lucia made sure I had proper meals even when I was buried in textbooks. Alessandro created quiet space for me to study, never interrupting when my door was closed, but always available when I needed a break. We split our time between the country house and Alessandro's penthouse in the city. The country property remained our sanctuary, the place we retreated to for peace and privacy, but the penthouse had its own appeal. Waking up to sunrise over Central Park, walking to nearby restaurants for dinner, the energy of the city that I'd missed more than I'd realized. Tonight was different, though. Tonight I was meeting Alessandro's family, not his blood family he'd clarified when he'd first mentioned it. His mother was gone. His father had never been in the picture, and he had no siblings. But the people who comprised his inner circle, his most trusted associates and their families, they were family in every way that mattered. They're going to love you, Alessandro said as we dressed for the dinner. He was already in his suit, charcoal gray with a subtle pinstripe, adjusting his cufflinks with practiced ease. You don't know that. I studied my reflection, smoothing the emerald green dress I'd chosen. Simple, but elegant, hitting just above my knees. Alessandro had noticed it in my closet weeks ago, and mentioned how the color brought out my eyes. I'd remembered. I know my people. They'll see what I see. Someone intelligent, genuine, and completely unimpressed by the usual power games. Is that a compliment? It's the highest compliment I can give. He came up behind me, his hands settling on my waist. You're real, Amanda. In a world full of people performing for advantage, you're just yourself. That's rare. The dinner was at a restaurant in Tribeca, one of those places without a sign where you needed a reservation months in advance or the right connections. We arrived to find a private room in the back, a long table already populated with people who stood when Alessandro entered. I recognized Marco immediately, and Lucia, who must have come early to help with arrangements. The others were new faces. A man around Alessandro's age with salt and pepper hair and sharp eyes. A woman in her 40s wearing diamonds that caught the light with every movement. A younger couple, maybe early 30s, who watched Alessandro with obvious respect. Everyone. Alessandro's hand was warm on my back. This is Amanda Turner. Amanda. This is my family. Introductions flowed. The man with salt and pepper hair was Vincent Greco, Alessandro's second in command. The woman with diamonds was Sofia Vitale, who apparently ran logistics for several of Alessandro's business interests. The younger couple were Michael and Adriana Foster, responsible for legal affairs and public relations respectively. They welcomed me with genuine warmth that surprised me. No judgment about who I was or where I came from. just acceptance based on Alessandro's clear regard for me. Dinner was incredible. Course after course of food that tasted like someone's Italian grandmother had spent days preparing. Conversation flowed easily once I relaxed. Vincent asked about my nursing work with actual interest. Sophia wanted to know about my specialization plans. Michael and Adriana shared stories about their own relationship, how they'd met through work and fallen in love despite initial professional boundaries. Alessandro is different with you, Sophia observed during a lull when the men were deep in discussion about something I deliberately tuned out. Lighter, more himself than I've seen him in years. He gives me credit for that, but I think he was already becoming that person. I watched him across the table, animated as he made some point to Vincent. I just happened to show up at the right time. Don't undersell yourself. Sophia's expression was knowing. What you've done for him goes beyond timing. He's been isolated by choice for so long. Letting anyone close felt like weakness to him. You changed that. Adriana leaned in. Also, you should know, we're all glad you're here. Not just because Alessandro's happier, but because you're genuinely good people. We can tell. Their acceptance settled something in my chest I hadn't realized was tense. These people were important to Alessandro. Having their approval mattered more than I'd wanted to admit. After dinner, we lingered over coffee and dessert. The conversation shifted to lighter topics. Travel recommendations, book suggestions, the kind of casual discussion that happens when people are comfortable with each other. Alessandro's hand found mine under the table, squeezing gently. When I glanced at him, his expression was soft with contentment. We said our goodbyes around 11. Hugs and promises to do this again soon. Lucia pressed containers of leftover food into my hands despite my protests. Vincent clasped Alessandro's shoulder with obvious affection. The drive back to the country house was quiet. I leaned against Alessandro's shoulder, processing the evening. That went well, I said finally. Better than well. They adore you. He kissed the top of my head, though I'm not surprised. You were exactly yourself, natural and warm without trying to perform or impress. They're good people. I wasn't expecting that. What were you expecting? I don't know. Maybe people who'd see me as a liability, or judge me for not being from your world. I shifted to look at him, but they just saw me as someone you care about. That was enough for them, because they trust my judgment, and because they can see what we have is real. The following weekend, Alessandro suggested we stay at the country house for 3 days. No work, no obligations, just us and whatever we felt like doing. Friday evening we cooked together, making far too much food and laughing when we realized we'd have leftovers for days. Saturday, we walked through the nearby town, exploring small shops and stopping at a cafe for lunch where nobody knew who Alessandro was or cared. Sunday morning, I woke to find his side of the bed empty. Not unusual. He was an early riser, but something felt different. The quality of silence in the house had changed. I found him in the garden, standing near Lucia's flower beds with his hands in his pockets. The late morning sun caught his dark hair, and he looked contemplative in a way that made my heart skip. "Hey," I said softly, not wanting to startle him. "You okay? Come here." He extended his hand and I took it, letting him pull me close. "I've been thinking. About us. About what we've built in these 8 months." His arm came around my waist. "About what I want our future to look like." My pulse quickened. "And what do you want it to look like?" Instead of answering, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. My breath caught. "This isn't a traditional proposal," he said, opening the box to reveal a delicate ring, emerald set in white gold, surrounded by tiny diamonds. "I'm not asking you to marry me next month or even next year. I'm asking if you'll let me promise you a future. If you'll wear this as a symbol that we're building toward something permanent, at whatever pace feels right for both of us." The ring was beautiful. Understated, but clearly expensive. The emerald catching light like captured fire. "Alessandro, I love you, Amanda. I want to build a life with you. Want to wake up beside you every morning for the rest of my life. Want to support your dreams and share mine with you. Want everything that comes with forever." His dark eyes held mine. "But I know you're still healing, still finding yourself again. I don't want to rush you or pressure you. So this isn't an engagement. It's a promise. Of my intention. Of my commitment. Of my certainty that you're the one I want. Tears blurred my vision. You're sure? About me? About us? I've never been more sure of anything. I held out my left hand, watching as he slid the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly, the emerald warm against my skin. I love you too, I whispered. And yes, to the promise, to the future, to all of it. He kissed me there in the garden with sunlight warming our skin and the scent of flowers in the air. When we broke apart, I was crying and laughing simultaneously. It's beautiful, I said, admiring the ring. How did you know my size? I may have borrowed one of your other rings and had it measured. His smile was slightly sheepish. Lucia was my accomplice. We spent the rest of the day talking about possibilities. Not concrete plans, but dreams. Maybe marriage in a year or two. Something small and intimate. Maybe children eventually. Though neither of us felt rushed. Maybe buying a house together that was truly ours rather than his with me added in. What made you decide now? I asked that evening as we sat on the back porch watching the sun set. Because I realized I didn't want to wait to tell you what you mean to me. Didn't want you to have any doubt about my intentions or feelings. He pulled me closer. You've transformed my life, Amanda. Brought light and warmth and humanity back to a man who'd forgotten how to feel anything beyond control and strategy. You saved me without even trying. You saved me first. Literally caught me when I fell. We saved each other then. His lips brushed my temple. And now we get to build whatever comes next together. Sitting there with the ring on my finger and Alessandro's arms around me, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. From that terrifying night on the subway to this moment of perfect peace. Every hardship, every fear, every moment of doubt had led to this. To love I never thought I'd find. To safety I'd stopped believing existed. To a future bright with possibility. Thank you, I said quietly. For what? For seeing me. For waiting for me to heal before pushing for more. For loving me exactly as I am. I turned to face him fully. You taught me that love doesn't have to hurt. That being protected and being free aren't mutually exclusive. That I deserve gentleness and patience and partnership. You taught me that power without purpose is empty. That the strongest thing I can do is be vulnerable with someone who matters. His hand came up to cut my cheek. You make me want to be better, Amanda. Not different, but better. As darkness fell and stars began appearing overhead, we sat together planning a future that belonged to both of us. Whatever challenges came, whatever complications arose from the life he led, we'd face them together. Equal partners. True companions. The promise ring caught starlight. And I thought, this is what happiness feels like. This moment. This man. This life we're building piece by careful piece. The calendar on my phone showed November 23rd. Exactly 1 year since that rainy night when I'd fainted on a subway train and landed in the arms of a stranger who would become everything. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at the plastic test in my hand. 2 pink lines, clear and unmistakable. Pregnant, 2 months along, according to the dates, which meant it had happened sometime in late September. During that weekend we'd spent at the country house doing nothing but existing together. My hands shook slightly as I set the test on the counter. This was planned, or at least not prevented. We'd talked about children months ago, agreed we both wanted them eventually, had stopped being careful about 6 months into our relationship, letting nature take its course without pressure or expectation. But seeing the confirmation made it real in a way I hadn't anticipated. Alessandro was downstairs making breakfast. I could smell coffee and something sweet, probably the French toast he'd perfected over the past year. We'd developed these routines, these small domestic rituals that made our life together feel solid and permanent. 3 months married. The wedding had been perfect. Small ceremony at the country house with just Alessandro's inner circle and a handful of my colleagues from the hospital. Lucia had cried. Marco had actually smiled. I'd worn a simple cream dress and carried wildflowers from the garden, and Alessandro had looked at me like I was the answer to every question he'd ever asked. We'd honeymooned in Italy, 2 weeks exploring Rome and Florence and the Amalfi Coast. He'd shown me where he'd grown up, introduced me to distant cousins who'd welcomed me with overwhelming warmth. I'd finally understood his roots, seen the country that had shaped him before New York had sharpened him. Coming home had felt right. Not like returning from paradise to reality, but like coming back to the life we'd built together. Our life. Equal parts his world and mine. Blended into something uniquely ours. I picked up the test again, studying those 2 lines. A baby. Our baby. Growing inside me right now while I stood here, processing the enormity of it. Amanda? Alessandro's voice drifted up the stairs. Breakfast is ready. I took a deep breath, tucked the test into my pocket, and headed downstairs. He'd set the table by the windows overlooking the garden. Fall had painted everything in shades of gold and amber. French toast, fresh strawberries, coffee for him, and orange juice for me. The domestic perfection of it made my chest tight. You okay? He looked up as I entered, those dark eyes immediately noticing something off. I'm perfect. I slid into my seat, reaching for the juice. Just thinking about how much has changed in a year. Everything has changed. He poured syrup over his toast. You changed everything. We ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. The pediatric nursing certification had been completed recently, the framed certificate now hanging in my small office in the city penthouse. I'd immediately started working at the clinic Alessandro had helped fund in a neighborhood that desperately needed quality pediatric care. The work was exactly what I'd dreamed of, helping children, supporting families through scary diagnoses and routine checkups alike. The clinic didn't turn anyone away regardless of ability to pay, funded by a combination of Alessandro's money and various grants I'd helped secure. It felt meaningful in a way that went beyond just doing my job. I was thinking, Alessandro said, setting down his fork. Tonight is our anniversary. 1 year since I caught you on that train. Technically, you caught me falling. The train catching came later. He smiled. Semantics. Point is, I want to do something to mark the occasion. What did you have in mind? Let's go back to that subway station. Stand on that platform and remember how impossibly lucky we got. The sentimentality of it surprised me. Alessandro was romantic and private, but grand gestures weren't typically his style. You want to revisit the subway? I want to acknowledge where we started. Honor the chance encounter that gave me you. His hand found mine across the table. Is that too strange? No, it's perfect. We spent the day doing ordinary things. I went to the clinic for a half shift. Saw 8 patients, including a little girl with an ear infection who was brave beyond her 5 years. Alessandro worked from his study, taking calls and reviewing contracts for a real estate development he was overseeing. He'd gradually shifted his focus over the past year. Still involved in the organization, still respected and feared in certain circles, but putting more energy into legitimate investments. Property development, import businesses that operated entirely above board. The transition was slow and careful, but the direction was clear. He was building a legacy that wouldn't require his children to choose between loving their father and respecting the law. Our children. Plural. Because of the baby I was carrying. I touched my stomach reflexively, wondering when I'd tell him. Tonight felt right. At the subway station where everything had started, I'd tell him about the new life we'd created. We left the house at 7, Marco driving us into the city. The route was familiar. I'd taken this drive hundreds of times over the past year, but tonight felt different, charged with significance. The subway station was busy with evening commuters. Alessandro held my hand as we descended the stairs, navigating through crowds of people rushing home from work. Nobody gave us a second glance. Just another couple in a city of millions. We found the spot where I'd fainted. The platform looked exactly the same. Same dingy tiles, same fluorescent lighting, same sense of barely controlled chaos. I was standing right here, Alessandro said quietly, heading home from a meeting, exhausted and irritated because the negotiations hadn't gone well. I was over there. I pointed to where I'd been gripping the pole, could barely stay upright. Everything was spinning, and then you fell, and you caught me. We stood there as trains came and went, commuters flowing around us like water around stones. Alessandro's arm came around my waist, pulling me close. Best thing that ever happened to me, he said. You falling into my arms. Literally and metaphorically. Both. He kissed the top of my head. Thank you for trusting me that night. for letting me help you even though every instinct probably told you to run. Thank you for seeing me, for caring about a stranger who had nothing to offer you. You had everything to offer. I just didn't know it yet. The platform was getting crowded as another train approached. Alessandro guided me back toward the stairs, and we climbed up to street level. The evening air was cool, not quite cold, carrying the first hints of winter. Ready to go home? He asked. Actually, can we walk for a bit? We walked through the city holding hands, neither of us talking much, just being together in the place where our story had started. Eventually, we ended up at a small park, sitting on a bench overlooking a playground that was empty in the gathering darkness. I have something to tell you, I said, my heart suddenly racing. Alessandro turned to face me, his expression attentive. What is it? I pulled the pregnancy test from my jacket pocket. I'd wrapped it in tissue, carried it with me all day waiting for the right moment. I'm pregnant. 2 months. For a long moment, he just stared at the test. Then his eyes found mine, and I saw tears gathering there. Alessandro Rinaldi, who commanded respect through presence alone, who'd built an empire through strength and strategy, was crying. Amanda. His voice broke on my name. He pulled me into his arms, holding me so tight I could barely breathe. We're having a baby? We're having a baby. He laughed, the sound joyful and slightly hysterical. When did you find out? This morning. I wanted to wait until tonight to tell you. Our anniversary felt like the right time. It's perfect. He pulled back to look at me, his hands framing my face. You're perfect. This is perfect. Are you ready for this? For parenthood? I've never been more ready for anything. His thumbs brushed away tears I hadn't realized I was crying. We're going to be good at this. Great at this. Together. We sat on that bench for over an hour, talking about the future. Baby names and nursery colors and what kind of parents we wanted to be. Alessandro wanted to protect without smothering. I wanted to nurture without losing myself. We both wanted to give our child the stability and love we'd found in each other. Boy or girl? He asked. Too early to know. Do you have a preference? Healthy. That's my only preference. His hand rested on my still flat stomach. Healthy, and loved, and safe. They'll be all of those things. By the time we got home, it was nearly midnight. The country house was dark, except for the lights we'd left on. Alessandro insisted on carrying me over the threshold, even though we'd been married for months. New beginning, he explained, setting me down gently in the foyer. New chapter. We stayed up late talking more about the pregnancy, doctor appointments and dietary changes and when to tell people. Alessandro wanted to tell everyone immediately. I wanted to wait until the first trimester was over, make sure everything was progressing well. We'll wait, he agreed. But I'm terrible at keeping secrets from my family. It's only a few more weeks. A few more weeks of me bursting with this news. You're cruel. You'll survive. Finally, exhaustion pulled at both of us. We climbed the stairs to our bedroom, the familiar space that had become my favorite place in the world. Alessandro helped me out of my clothes with gentle hands, his touch reverent now that he knew about the baby. We lay in bed facing each other, his hand resting on my stomach. I love you, he said quietly. You and this baby. You're my entire world. I love you too. So much it scares me sometimes. Don't be scared. We're in this together. Forever. Sleep came slowly. My mind was too active, racing through everything that would change. But Alessandro's presence beside me, his hand warm on my stomach, grounded me. Whatever came next, we'd face it as partners, as a family. I woke before dawn to find Alessandro already awake, watching me with an expression of such tender love, it made my breath catch. Come on, he whispered. I want to show you something. He led me out to the back porch, wrapped in a blanket against the morning chill. The sky was just beginning to lighten, stars fading as the sun prepared to rise. We sat on the porch swing, and Alessandro pulled me close. 1 year ago, I caught a woman falling on a subway platform, he said as the first rays of light painted the sky pink and gold. I thought I was saving her. Didn't realize she was saving me right back. We saved each other. We did. His hand found mine, fingers interweaving. And now we get to create a whole new life together. Give this baby everything we didn't have growing up. stability, safety, love that doesn't hurt. They're going to be so loved. I leaned into his warmth, watching the sun rise over the trees. So incredibly loved. The dawn broke full and bright, painting everything in shades of hope. 1 year ago, I'd been broken and terrified, running from a man who'd convinced me I was worthless. Now I was whole, safe, loved beyond measure, and growing a new life inside me. Alessandro's arm tightened around me as the world woke up around us. Birds singing, wind rustling through trees. The beginning of a new day, a new year, a new chapter. Thank you, I whispered. For what? For catching me when I fell. For seeing who I really was. For loving me back to life. Thank you for letting me. He kissed my temple. For choosing me. For building this life with me. For giving me a reason to be better. We sat there until the sun was fully risen, wrapped in each other in blankets and the promise of everything still to come. A baby on the way. A love that had transformed us both. A future bright with possibility. This was happiness. Not the absence of problems or the erasure of past pain, but the presence of love strong enough to face whatever came next. Together. Always together. The end.